Well, NATO spokesman Jamie Shea is on the line from Brussels. Good morning, Mr. Shea.
Good morning, Hugh.
Can you clear up first the confusion still surrounding the pilots of these two MiGs that were shot down? What happened to them?
We still don't know. They did eject. They were seen to be ejecting and moving towards the ground, but we're still trying to identify them.
Okay, well, what do you think the MiGs were doing over Bosnia?
Well, they were certainly violating Bosnian airspace, which in itself is a very serious incident.
You must be very concerned about the reports coming out of Kosovo of atrocities being committed against Kosovar Albanians, and the evidence, I suppose, that actually the impact of the airstrikes has been to allow the Serb forces free rein there without anybody being able to see what they're up to.
Certainly we are very concerned about all of these reports. Absolutely. There's mounting evidence from a number of different sources now that terrible things are happening in Kosovo. The Serbs have always said that they're attacking only the UCK, or the Kosovo Liberation Army, but there's mounting evidence that that's wrong. They're simply attacking Albanians for the sake of killing Albanians, including intellectuals. But I would take issue with the assumption behind your question that this is the result of NATO airstrikes. These killings have been going on for the better part of a year.
That's why there's no one there, isn't it? That's why there's no one there to see what's going on.
But we know. We will have the evidence. We have already reports coming out. We're checking them. And as we made clear yesterday, we will have evidence to initiate war crimes prosecutions in the future against those that are carrying out these massacres. There will be no impunity for them, and they should know that.
Jamie Shea, thank you.
And on the line now is the Armed Forces Minister, Doug Henderson. What's the latest you're hearing, Mr. Henderson, from Kosovo? What do your sources tell you?
But the complete picture isn't available to us, though, as the NATO spokesman previously said, it does appear as though there have been some pretty atrocious activities undertaken by the Serbian forces in the last couple of days.
And the whole point of these air raids was to stop precisely that happening?
No, the point of the air raids is to degrade the capacity of President Milosevic to do this over a longer period. These atrocities have been committed for many weeks and months. Even last week, while the talks were going on in Paris, the atrocities were continuing. And so a decision had to be reached as to whether or not one tackles the problem better by doing nothing or by taking action to prevent, in the medium and longer term, President Milosevic undertaking this kind of activity. And that's the decision that we reached.
It's a truism to say that war reporting has changed over the years. Obviously, the presence of television cameras has transformed the way the news is delivered. But some things don't change, and perhaps the most crucial is the relationship between the reporter and the authorities in the country from which he or she is reporting. It's a difficult, sometimes dangerous balance to strike. The war with Yugoslavia was barely 24 hours old before they were throwing journalists out of Belgrade. So how can we be sure from now on that we'll get a reasonably accurate picture of what's happening? Max Hastings, now the editor of the Evening Standard in London, has done his share of war reporting. He was the first reporter into the liberated Port Stanley in the Falklands. But even he is a novice compared with Claire Hollingworth, who was the first person to report the German invasion of Poland and has been reporting wars ever since. Claire Hollingworth, is there still a role for, if I may describe you thus, old-fashioned war reporters like you?
I think there is, yes, because people still want to know what's happening on the ground, as it were, and you can give the atmosphere, and you can, if you obey, I'm sure, obey the rules and the censorship and so on, still give the atmosphere within the whole strategic ambiance of whatever war it is you're talking about.
But isn't it much more difficult nowadays, particularly when wars tend to be fought, as this one is at the moment, from the air? It's not like rolling up after the tanks have gone in.
You've got a very good point there. Unless you're actually in the aeroplane and can say what's happening there is no, it's very, very different. A terrific point there.
Max, what do you think? What's the big change as far as you're concerned?
I don't think the basics have changed, because all reporting has always been about putting jigsaw puzzles together with a lot of the pieces missing. All that happens in war is that even more of the pieces are missing. And I remember when I first went to Vietnam back in 1970, and I rang up that wonderful and very experienced war reporter, Nicholas Tomlin, and I said, would you give me any advice? And he said, yes, just remember, they lie, they lie, they lie. And it's always the same, and one is always struggling to try to find those bits. What I think is most important is that when one is reporting, or when one is editing newspapers or television programs during these situations, you have to keep telling the public the health warnings. We don't know. This is our best guess. This is our best shot. This very morning, the papers are full of reports from Kosovo of atrocities of one kind or another, of the things the Serbs are alleged to have been done. It's somewhere between possible and probable that the Serbs have done some of these things. But in wars, everybody is exaggerating, telling lies, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad, and we have to keep saying to the public, this is our best shot at what we can find out, but we don't know that much. And it's fair to say, I don't believe the NATO commanders know that much either.
Oh. When is it allowed, perhaps this is a good question for you, Claire, when is it allowed for, or if ever, for a reporter to say, I will not pursue the truth either too avidly, or at least I will be not a propagandist, but I will not necessarily tell the whole story as I have seen it because of the effect it might have at home?
Well, I've never taken that view personally. I've always taken it as my job. So far as censorship was concerned, political or military censorship is concerned, given that, I've always taken it as my idea of getting to Mrs. Smith in Surbiton the atmosphere and the truth about what the war. I have, to the best of my knowledge and belief, never deliberately exaggerated.